He built it to keep the world out. He called it freedom. The case file calls it something else. Picture it. The apartment is clean. The schedule is yours. The weekends belong to nobody but you. No obligations you didn't choose. No compromises you didn't agree to. You answer to nothing but your own calendar. And yet, at some point, not dramatically, not suddenly, you notice that the last time someone knew what you were thinking was a very long time ago. Not because you forgot how to speak, because you stopped leaving the door unlocked. In my former life, I studied people under surveillance. The ones who knew they were being watched changed their behavior. The interesting cases, the ones that stayed with me, were the ones who had removed themselves from all possible surveillance entirely. Not suspects, not criminals. People who had simply decided at some point that the world was easier to manage from a distance. His name was Andrew, 44 years old, remote work. A flat on the edge of the city, broad-shouldered, economical in his movements, the kind of man who never gestures when he speaks. Intelligent, considered, no drama, and building a lighthouse, one careful decision at a time, with himself locked inside it. Tonight we open the file on solitude. Not the healthy kind, the kind that restores you. The other kind. The kind you build so carefully that you forget it has walls. What it looks like from the inside. Why it feels like freedom. And what the difference is. The precise, crucial difference between choosing to be alone and exiling yourself from connection. Andrew had not always lived this way. There was a period, his late 20s, early 30s, when his life was full in the conventional sense. A long relationship, a shared flat, friends who appeared without notice, work colleagues who became something more than colleagues. Then a series of things happened, not catastrophic things, not a single devastating event, just the ordinary accumulation of disappointments that comes from being close to people. The relationship ended, neither of them dramatic about it, both of them quietly devastated. A close friend moved cities, and the friendship didn't survive the distance. A trusted colleague turned out to be less trustworthy than expected. Andrew processed each of these rationally. He drew reasonable conclusions, proximity costs, distance protects, and he began methodically, intelligently, to restructure his life around these conclusions. Remote work eliminated the office, the daily proximity to people he hadn't chosen. A flat further from the center, quieter, fewer encounters, more control over who and what entered his space. Social commitments reduced from obligation to option. If he didn't want to go, he didn't go. Each decision made complete sense on its own. Each decision was defensible, reasonable, intelligent. Andrew had optimized his life so thoroughly for solitude that his emergency contacts list read himself, his GP, and a man named Pavel, who he'd met once at a conference in 2019 and whose number he'd never deleted. 5 years later, Andrew looked up from his desk one Tuesday afternoon and realized he had not had a conversation that went below the surface in approximately 8 months. He had spoken to people, of course. The woman at the grocery shop, video calls for work, a brief exchange with a neighbor about the heating, but spoken to in the sense of being known, even slightly, even momentarily. That had not happened. And the strange thing, the thing that brought him to this office, was that he couldn't locate the moment it had stopped. There was no door he had closed. There were only doors he had never opened. Here's what the file also shows. The cost of this was not loneliness. Loneliness you can identify. Loneliness has a shape you can point to. The cost was numbness. The cost was waking up one ordinary Wednesday and feeling nothing particularly wrong. No grief, no pain, no ache of missing, and realizing that this absence of feeling was not peace. It was the sound of the antenna having been turned off. He had confused the off switch with the solution. I understand this particular architecture. I've built smaller versions of it myself, periods where I arranged my life to minimize friction, and only later noticed that what I had also minimized was contact. The first time it felt like relief. The second time like a preference. The third time I realized the thing I called peace was just the absence of friction I'd stopped being willing to experience. The walls go up quietly. They look like preferences. But the deeper case is not about whether Andrew was lonely. He was. But that's not the crime. The deeper case is about what Andrew had confused. Solitude and exile are not the same thing. Solitude is chosen. It has a door. You enter it to restore something, to think, to become more yourself. And then, when it has done its work, you leave. Exile has no door from the inside. Exile is what happens when the original decision, reasonable, protective, made in response to real pain, calcifies. When the temporary arrangement becomes permanent. When the walls you built to keep the hurt out become the walls that keep everything out. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that Andrew had read, highlighted, and in the way of all the most important sentences, completely failed to apply to himself. We are made for cooperation like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of upper and lower teeth. This is not a sentiment. This is an observation about human biology and human psychology that is held for 2,000 years. We are not designed for the lighthouse. We are designed for the village. Not the noisy, exhausting, obligation-filled version of the village that burned Andrew, but something that knows him, something he knows back. Existentialism adds the other layer. Heidegger wrote about being with, the idea that human existence is fundamentally relational. You do not exist and then encounter others. You exist in relation to others. Remove the relation systematically, carefully, rationally, and something in the existence itself begins to thin. And here is what the Stoics say about Andrew's method specifically. He believed he was practicing the discipline of control, focusing only on what was within his jurisdiction, his work, his environment, his time. But jurisdiction has a subtler meaning. It is not just what you can control. It is what you are responsible for. And Andrew had confused the two. He had outsourced his loneliness, declared it a preference, filed it under personality, and in doing so, abandoned responsibility for the one thing that was entirely, genuinely his. His capacity for connection. Andrew had, at one point, a very meaningful relationship with a houseplant named Bernard. Bernard did not survive the winter. Andrew found this more affecting than he expected, and spent some time examining why a plant's death could reach him when most human contact had stopped doing so. Bernard, it transpired, had been the last living thing in his flat that needed him. The lighthouse sends its beam out across the water. Steady, reliable, useful to ships it will never meet. Inside the lighthouse, the keeper maintains the mechanism. He does his work. He is good at it. He just cannot remember the last time anyone came in out of the storm. Andrew came to me not in crisis. He came with a question. He said, "I have everything arranged exactly the way I wanted. So why does Tuesday afternoon feel like that?" I asked him. "Like what?" He paused for a long time. Then he said, "Like a lighthouse that's been on so long it's forgotten what it's waiting for." That sentence appears rarely in these cases. When it does, it means the person already knows the diagnosis. They just need someone to confirm it. I told him, the arrangement is not the problem. The quiet is real. The autonomy matters. The preference is genuine. The problem is that the arrangement has no door for others to come through. What it actually says, when you look at it in the light, is this: I was hurt. I didn't find a way through it. So I found a way around it. And now I'm calling the detour the destination. Move 1. Locate the original wound precisely. Not relationships are painful. That's a category, not a diagnosis. The specific thing, the specific person, the specific moment when proximity stopped feeling safe and distance started feeling like intelligence. Because until you locate it precisely, you cannot distinguish between a reasonable response to that specific situation and a general policy applied to everyone, forever, based on evidence from one moment in time. The wound was real. The policy may be outdated. Move 2. Distinguish solitude from exile in practice. Ask yourself one question, honestly. When I am alone, do I feel restored or do I feel safe? These are not the same thing. Restoration is solitude doing its proper work. You enter it depleted. You leave it more yourself. The door was always there. Safety is the lighthouse. You are incited because the alternative feels dangerous. The door exists, but you stop looking for it. One is a choice. The other is a habit that forgot it was ever a choice. Move 3. One small opening, not a renovation. Not a new policy of openness. Not a decision to become a different person. One small opening. Andrew's brief was simple. Once this week, say something true to someone who didn't need to hear it. Not useful information. Not a work update. Something true. He called his sister. They spoke every few weeks, efficiently, catching up on facts. He told her, "I've been thinking about how I've arranged my life, and I'm not sure I got it right." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I've been waiting for you to say something like that for about 3 years. The lighthouse didn't come down, but one window opened. That was enough for a Tuesday afternoon." Solitude is not the enemy. I want to say that clearly. The capacity to be alone, genuinely, restoratively alone, is one of the most important things a person can develop. The world is loud. Other people are complicated. The ability to withdraw, to think, to restore yourself without constant external input. This is not a failure of connection. It is a foundation for it. But there is a version that goes further than this. A version where the withdrawal becomes the default, where the preference becomes the policy, where the protection becomes the prison. And the difference, the only difference that matters, is whether the door still opens from the inside. 3 final moves. 1. Check the door. Not dramatically. Just check it. Ask yourself, if someone I valued reached out right now, genuinely, unexpectedly needing contact, would I open the door? Or have I arranged things so that the answer is always no by default? The answer tells you which kind of solitude you're in. 2. Tell someone something true, not useful, not informative, true. One sentence about what you are actually experiencing to someone who has not specifically asked. This is the smallest possible act of connection that still counts. It does not require vulnerability as a performance. It requires only that you allow someone to know something real about you. Once, this week. 3. Let the storm bring someone in. When someone reaches out imperfectly, awkwardly, at the wrong moment, let them in anyway. Not forever. Not unconditionally. Just this once, on this occasion, for this conversation. The lighthouse is still yours. You are just opening one window. The beam keeps going. The mechanism keeps running. You are not abandoning the structure. You are remembering why it was built. Andrew didn't dismantle the lighthouse. He still works remotely. He still values quiet. He still needs more space than most people. But his sister calls on Tuesdays now. He answers. Sometimes the call is 15 minutes. Sometimes it's an hour. He told me recently, I hadn't realized how much I'd been keeping the beam pointed out. I forgot that light can also point inward. You didn't build the lighthouse to be alone forever. You built it because the sea was rough and you needed to see. The sea is calmer now. Open the window. Solitude is a door, not a wall. Check which one yours is.